Hey guys, tonight we drift back into a world that smells nothing like the clean, minty fresh modern night you're probably lying in right now. Instead, you step into a dawn where the air itself feels heavier, warmer, thicker, like it's trying to warn you. You're standing on a cramped Roman street, the sun barely lifting over the clay-red rooftops, and already the scent rising around you is so intense you're half convinced you won't survive this little stroll. But don't worry, we're doing it gently, slowly, sleepily, the way we always do here. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I always love seeing how far this cozy little community reaches across the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You take your first quiet steps onto the basalt stones that make up the street, each one polished smooth by centuries of sandals, hooves, and spilled, well, everything. The sky shifts from ink blue to diluted gold, and as the light strengthens, so does the scent. It hits you as a layered experience, like a chaotic perfume made by someone who hates you. It's not one smell, it's 50 smells stacked on top of each other, gossiping and arguing in the air, and lucky you get to breathe all of it in. A mainstream historical fact drifts through your mind. Ancient Rome had no concept of what you'd call modern sanitation. Sure, they had the legendary aqueducts and the impressive sewer known as the Cloaca Maxima, but as you look around, you realize most of the city's daily life never made it anywhere near those marvels. What you're smelling is simply Rome, being Rome. A woman on the third floor of the nearest insula leans out with a clay pot. You instinctively step away from the wall. Wise choice, because you already know what might come next. The Romans had a delightful habit of tossing the contents of their chamber pots onto the streets below. They usually shouted a warning first, but not always. The early morning sun glints off the rim of the pot, and you're suddenly aware of how vulnerable your toes are. You shuffle further off the danger zone while casually pretending you're just admiring a stray cat stretching itself awake. Historians still argue whether early mornings were actually the worst for street smells or whether the heat of midday cooked everything into a kind of olfactory apocalypse. Either way, you're catching the first wave of whatever the night produced, and there's something oddly comforting about knowing that Romans too woke up to this sensory ambush every single day. It's strangely democratizing. Emperors, slaves, merchants, bakers, everyone smelled the same air. You move toward a small fountain, one of the public basins constantly fed by aqueduct water. The trickle of cool liquid sparkles in the rising light, and for a brief moment you think it might smell fresh. It does not. Someone washed their clothes here late last night, and whatever soap substitute they used, likely animal fat mixed with ash, has settled into the grooves of the stone. You inhale and get a whiff of something that reminds you of wet wool in a locker room. Lucky you. A quirky tidbit floats into your memory. The Romans sometimes used crushed oysters as deodorant. Looking at the street around you, you're not sure whether that would help or just add a new problem. You continue your slow, weary path down the lane. A mule ambles past, its owner barely awake, still rubbing sleep from his eyes. The mule drops something behind it with the lazy confidence of an animal that knows someone else will eventually step in it. You sidestep the pile with a grace you didn't know you had, like a half-asleep ballerina performing in ancient muck. Somewhere above, pigeons coo from ledges, clearly judging your reaction. The sun climbs higher, revealing more of Rome's morning anatomy. Laundry lines stretching like faint spiderwebs, rooftop terraces covered in dew, and tenement windows where people peer out and yawn into the day. The city wakes not with birdsong but with the murmur of voices, the clatter of carts, and the soft, persistent underlying note of stench. But as you breathe it in again, something unexpected happens. The smell doesn't make you recoil anymore. It's still bad, don't get me wrong, but your nose is already getting used to the idea that ancient streets don't care about your comfort. You pause beside a bakery where warm air pours out of a clay oven. The scent of bread, actual, honest bread, rises around you, and you savour it like a miracle. For a moment, this smell almost wins. Almost. But then you catch the familiar undertone of yeast fermenting a bit too enthusiastically in the corner. You can't help but smile. Rome keeps you humble. A boy carrying a basket races past, narrowly avoiding splashing something questionable onto your sandals. He laughs, not at you specifically, just because life in Rome is chaotic enough at sunrise to count as entertainment. You shake your head, amused in that sleepy, resigned way you get when waking dreams blend with historical nonsense. You're here, after all, to drift, not to judge. A little further down, a dog noses through last night's scraps, tail wagging at the promise of adventure. It sniffs something, sneezes violently, and trots away as if offended. You take that as your cue to avoid that particular corner. You continue moving, each step easing you deeper into the slow rhythm of the waking city. The smells blend into a kind of soft background hum, almost atmospheric, almost soothing if you surrender to it fully. The day will get louder, brighter, and much, much smellier. But right now, it's just beginning. Just a whisper of the olfactory chaos to come. You breathe out, letting the dawn settle around you like warm linen. You ease further down the waking street, and just as you begin to think the air is leveling out into something you can tolerate, Rome gently taps you on the shoulder and says, "Oh no, we're only getting started." Because now you're entering the zone where last night's chamber pots meet their destiny, and you, lucky sleeper, get a front row seat. You hear the faint scrape of pottery on stone from somewhere above. Your instincts, honed in less than an hour of Roman exposure, tell you to step closer to the centre of the street. It feels counterintuitive. Usually the middle is where carts rumble and donkey hooves clatter. But in Rome, the danger comes from above just as much as from below. A casual cave floats down, not shouted, more like someone muttering "heads up," while already halfway back to bed. A splash follows. You do not need to look. Your imagination paints enough of a picture, complete with sound effects. You give yourself a tiny, heroic nod for avoiding that one. The truth is simple. Ancient Romans used chamber pots at night, and instead of storing them for proper disposal, or carefully walking them to a designated dump point, many residents just tossed the contents out the window. A mainstream historical fact says that some regions had laws requiring people to shout a warning before dumping. A fringe tidbit adds that sometimes the warning was ignored because, well, people are people. Historians still argue whether the enforcement was lax or if residents just collectively decided the rule was more of a suggestion. You keep walking, hugging your cloak a little tighter around your shoulders, not because of the cold, but because you're not entirely confident the fabric hasn't already brushed up against something regrettable. The air around you becomes a layered symphony of ammonia, damp stone, and the vague but unmistakable scent of human life being, well, human. On your right, a woman opens her shutters wide to release the stale indoor air, giving you a cheerful nod as if the early morning dump from her neighbour wasn't swirling around your ankles. You smile back, mostly because maintaining the illusion of normalcy feels polite. Rome is a city where acknowledging the smell openly is considered more awkward than the smell itself. And here's a joke that your sleepy mind conjures. If air fresheners had existed in ancient Rome, they'd probably have been outlawed for sorcery. You step around a small flowing trickle on the stones. The street itself is thoughtfully sloped to allow liquids, of all kinds, to run toward the drainage channel in the centre. You follow the rivulet with your eyes, watching it join a larger puddle that looks suspiciously warm. A nearby cat pokes at it, decides it is unworthy of further attention, and leaps away with offended dignity. A mule cart rattles by, the driver giving you an apologetic wave as one of the wheels splashes that puddle just a little too close to where you stand. You hop aside, nearly twisting your ankle, but hey, the things you do to keep those sandals clean. The sound of broken pottery crunching underfoot draws your attention to the shattered remains of several chamber pots. People drop them accidentally when leaning too far out the window, and sometimes deliberately when they're too cracked to use anymore. You can almost imagine the moment someone sighed, whispered, good enough, and chucked it straight down. It adds to the ambience, Rome's version of modern urban littering, only with sharper consequences. Another quirky detail drifts into your mind. Some wealthier households had servants whose nightly job was simply to carry waste down and dump it in designated pits. But judging from the street around you, that practice didn't exactly trickle down to everyone else. Someone upstairs begins singing, a cheerful morning tune about nothing in particular, and for a moment the sweetness of the melody almost makes you forget where you are. Then the singer pauses, there's a scraping sound, and another pot tips suspiciously toward the window. You glide away like a dancer who suddenly remembers the choreography involves dodging liquids. The sun climbs a bit higher, heating the stones ever so slightly, and the scent thickens. The warmth transforms everything into a kind of humid street perfume. A soft breeze picks up, carrying with it a medley of smells from adjacent alleys, some faintly sour, some unmistakably human, some strangely herbal. You wonder whether apothecaries secretly developed powders not to heal, but simply to survive this olfactory landscape. A group of children dash past, laughing as they kick a leather ball. One yells, "Don't let it go toward the middle," which tells you all you need to know about the consequences of a missed kick. You move instinctively out of their way. Childhood in ancient Rome is rough, but at least they have good reflexes. You turn a corner and the street widens slightly, giving you a bit more breathing room. But even here, chamber pot remnants cling to the stones in a pale, chalky film. The city never truly erases these traces. It simply layers new ones over old ones, day after day, year after year, like a slowly accumulating aroma mosaic. You breathe through your mouth for a moment, reconsider the decision, and go right back to your nose. Neither option is great. You catch yourself smiling again. Rome has a funny way of wearing you down until even the strange becomes gently, sleepily hilarious. You accept that this is the city's morning personality, bold, unapologetic, and slightly damp. You exhale, letting the mix of scents settle into the background hum of your journey, and continue deeper into the waking city. You continue your slow drift down the widening Roman lane, and just when you think you've earned a moment of relative peace, the city introduces you to its next aromatic masterpiece, animal droppings. Because if chamber pots were Rome's upper floor problem, the creatures working the streets were the ground-level co-conspirators in your ongoing nasal assault. A donkey ambles past you at the exact speed of someone who has zero responsibilities and zero regrets. Its hooves click softly against the basalt paving stones, and its tail swishes lazily, like it's conducting an invisible orchestra. Then, without breaking pace, it leaves a small, steaming contribution to the day's sensory experience. You stop mid-stride, silently applauding the animal's impeccable timing. This, right here, is Rome's unofficial early morning ritual. Animals everywhere and droppings too. You can't escape it, not because you're unlucky, but because the city is practically built around animal labour. Carts, deliveries, tradespeople, everyone depends on hooved colleagues who leave evidence. A mainstream historical fact floats gently into your mind. Rome relied heavily on animals for transport. Donkeys, mules, horses, even oxen in some districts. Tens of thousands of animals move through the city every day. And where there are animals, there's the constant soundtrack of snorts, clops, and the unmistakable plop that makes you reconsider your life decisions. You step around one such plop now, manoeuvring with the choreographed grace of someone avoiding a Lego on a dark floor. Except this Lego is warm, fragrant, and actively reminding you it exists. You take a wide arc, trying to look natural, as though you're deeply interested in a nearby wall fresco that's definitely just peeling plaster. A quirky tidbit nudges into your thoughts. Some Roman streets had men whose whole job was sweeping up the animal droppings. Not for sanitation, oh no, but because the dung was actually valuable. Tanners, farmers, brickmakers, all wanted it. So the sweepers worked fast, scooping up what they could before someone else claimed the prize. Imagine a competitive job market based on who gets to the poop first. Truly inspiring. Historians still argue whether this dung-collecting workforce was city-funded, privately hired, or just a bunch of ambitious freelancers armed with baskets and a strong stomach. But you know what you see right now? No sweepers, just you, some donkeys, and a growing suspicion that sandals were a bad idea. A pair of oxen lumbers past you next, pulling a heavy cart stacked with amphorae. Their breath pours into the morning air like small clouds. Their handler whistles softly, guiding them through the street's narrowing edges. One ox looks at you with the gentle, resigned eyes of an animal who's been doing this since sunrise and probably before. Then it huffs, shifts its weight, and adds its own fragrant punctuation mark to the stones. You inhale by accident. The experience is vivid. Even the street dogs participate in the aromatic network. You spot one trotting proudly with a bone it absolutely did not receive through legal channels. It pauses, surveys the territory, and chooses its favourite spot to leave a message for other dogs. You turn your gaze upward, pretending you're admiring Roman architecture, which is easier than acknowledging what's happening at your feet. You pass a butcher loading cuts of meat into a handcart, his sandals splattered with reminders of animals living and no longer living all around him. He waves cheerfully, completely unfazed by the fact that the ground around his stall looks like the public bathroom of a very confused farm. A mule behind you brays, offended by something only mule logic can decipher. You smile despite yourself. Rome's soundtrack is emerging. Human chatter, cartwheels squeaking, vendors warming up their voices, and animals doing whatever they want, whenever they want. Another soft joke enters your mind. In Rome, a clean street just means the droppings are less than 10 minutes old. A breeze drifts through the alley, shifting the scents like flipping a page in an olfactory novel. You catch a whiff of hay from a nearby stable, mixed with leather harnesses, sweat, and the unmistakable peppery tang of yet another animal contribution. The breeze disappears almost instantly, as if deciding this job is too difficult. Someone hauls a bucket of water, probably from one of the fountains, and pours it across the stones in an attempt to wash away part of the mess. The water rolls downhill, carrying bits of everything with it, and you dance backward again, successfully avoiding contact but looking like you just performed the world's slowest moonwalk. A market vendor steps outside to sweep the front of his stall. He eyes a fresh pile with deep disappointment, sighs heavily, and nudges it toward the gutter with his broom. At least it's not the geese this time, he mutters, revealing a new horror you didn't need to worry about yet. As the street widens, you glimpse a carriage, rare in these cramped districts, guided by two horses whose hooves clatter confidently. The carriage wheels splash through something, and you whisper a small prayer that you're far enough away. You are. Barely. Rome continues waking. More animals arrive, more merchants shout greetings, more smells rise. But something inside you shifts. The stench isn't quite as shocking anymore. It becomes part of the city's heartbeat, its ancient rhythm, its romantic chaos. You walk deeper still, guided by curiosity, resignation, and a growing appreciation for the resilience of Roman noses. You exhale, letting the animal-scented morning settle around you like a strangely cozy blanket. You drift onward, lulled into the strange rhythm of dodging droppings and sidestepping runoff, when the city gently pivots to introduce you to the next layer of its aromatic orchestra, the butchers and their glorious messy shop fronts. You don't need to see them yet. Your nose tells you they're close. There's a metallic tang in the air, sharp and bright, like a handful of copper coins left out in the sun. Mixed with it is a faint sweetness that makes you instantly suspicious. In Rome, sweet smells are rarely good news. You turn a corner and there it is. A line of butcher stalls opening for the day, each one tucked into the archways of old insular walls. The shopkeepers move with practiced efficiency, wiping tables, sharpening knives, dragging wooden blocks into place. The scraping of metal on whetstone hums through the air like a sleepy chorus warming up. It should be comforting. It is not. A mainstream historical fact cuts through the haze. Romans did most butchering right on the street. No enclosed shops, no refrigeration, no tidy back room. Everything happened out here in the open, where passers-by like you were gifted a full sensory experience whether they wanted it or not. And judging from the expressions of the early morning customers, most people didn't even blink at it. You watch one butcher haul out a freshly delivered carcass, its hooves knocking softly against the stone as he drags it across the ground. He greets you with a pleasant salve, as though he's not holding something that looks like it belonged in a much livelier field an hour ago. You nod back politely. Because what else do you do? There's a small drainage channel running past the stalls. Nothing fancy, just a long groove formed by centuries of scraped water and spilled fluids. Someone tosses a bucket of water across the table, and the contents swirl darkly toward the gutter. You absolutely do not follow the puddle with your eyes, but your peripheral vision betrays you anyway. It's fine. You're strong. You're bravish. A quirky tidbit surfaces from the fog of your mind. Roman butchers sometimes hung meat outdoors for hours, even in the sun, relying on a mixture of salt, shade, and prayers to the household gods to keep things from spoiling too fast. Today, watching a slab of goat sway perilously close to a warm breeze, you're not convinced the gods were always listening. Historians still argue whether most of the meat sold in Roman cities was actually freshly slaughtered, or if people were unknowingly buying cuts that had been marinating in natural conditions for a while. You take one look at a piece of beef resting on a table without a covering and decide that scholarly debate can remain as open-ended as the shop front. A cat darts between your legs, heading straight for a pile of bones stacked near one stall. The butcher shoos it away with a gentle flick of his broom, muttering something about pesky thieves. The cat pretends to retreat, circles around, and attempts the exact same move from the opposite side. Its persistence is admirable. You root for the cat quietly. Behind another counter, a butcher's apprentice stands on a stool, half asleep, rubbing his eyes with one hand while holding a knife in the other. He yawns so wide you're convinced he's about to swallow a fly. Then he drops the knife, picks it up again, and continues working as though he didn't just have a near-death experience. This is what happens when your job starts at dawn. Reality becomes optional. You pass hanging strings of sausages looping like fleshy garlands. They sway gently in the breeze, and for a moment, their rhythmic movement is almost hypnotic until you remember what's inside them. You nod respectfully and keep walking. A butcher calls out to you, offering a special deal on some very fresh lamb. You thank him but decline, mostly because the lamb is looking at you from the table with the expression of someone who disagrees strongly with that description. He shrugs, unbothered, and turns his attention to the next potential customer. The smell here is a complicated blend. Metallic, fatty, warm, and slightly sour. If Rome's streets had a perfume line, this would be one of the stronger notes. Not the best seller, but certainly the one people talk about. You step aside just in time, as a boy runs past carrying a large bucket of something that sloshes ominously. He nearly splashes your sandals, and in that instant you understand why Romans favoured thick leather footwear. Your delicate sleep brain silently vows never to complain about modern grocery stores again. A soft joke floats through your mind. If you ever wondered what farm-to-table looked like in ancient Rome, congratulations, you're standing in it. The sun climbs higher, warming the butcher stalls. The heat begins coaxing even richer scents into the air. A customer approaches with a woven basket, selecting cuts so casually you wonder if their nose is simply asleep forever. You envy that. You glance down and notice that the street stones here are permanently stained, a mosaic of decades worth of spills, washes, and the occasional bucket that didn't quite reach the gutter. It adds character, a very specific kind of character. You step away from the butcher row, letting the sound of whetstones fade behind you. The air changes again, not sweeter, not cleaner, but different. Rome is generous. She never gives you one smell for too long. You exhale deeply, letting the butcher's scent soften behind you as you continue drifting deeper into the city's waking life. You wander onward, easing into the steady beat of Rome's waking chaos when the air ahead begins to shift again. It's subtle at first, a sour note blending with something smoky, something bitter, something unmistakably sharp. You slow your steps, because this smell is different from the butcher's metallic haze. This one hits you higher, in the nose, almost like it wants to grab your sinuses and shake them awake. And then you see it, the tanneries. Rows of low workshops lean against the walls of old buildings, each one bubbling, steaming, and quietly judging your modern expectations of cleanliness. If the butchers made you wrinkle your nose, the tanners are about to make you question your life choices entirely. The first thing you notice is the haze hanging over the vats, thick, warm, and strangely shimmering, like Rome has created its own personal fog machine powered entirely by discomfort. The second thing you notice is the smell. Oh, the smell. It's an intense blend of urine, smoke, wet hides, and something that feels like it crawled out of a dragon's laundry basket. Your eyes water on instinct. A mainstream historical fact drifts into your mind, uninvited but helpful. Roman tanners soaked animal hides in large vats of human urine to soften them. Yes, urine. People collected it, stored it, and sold it to the tanners. There were even designated jars in the streets called piss pots, not the official Latin term sadly, where citizens were encouraged to donate. And now that you're standing here, breathing the fumes, you suddenly understand why those jars were always full. Everyone wanted this smell as far from their homes as possible. A tanner spots you lingering near the entrance and waves cheerfully, as if inviting you into the world's strangest spa. He stirs a vat with a wooden paddle, the liquid inside bubbling like a cauldron in a fairy tale, just without the magic, and with a lot more biological realism. Steam rises in steady clouds, carrying notes of ammonia strong enough to make your hair consider leaving your body. A quirky tidbit floats into your sleepy mind. Some ancient writers joked that you could smell a tannery from a mile away. Standing here now, you suspect they weren't joking at all. If anything, you think they were being generous. Historians still argue whether these workshops were pushed to the city edges because of the smell or because of the nature of the work, but looking around, you know exactly which theory you believe. Even the street dogs give this place a wide berth, trotting past with an expression that says, respectfully, no. One of the workers lifts a dripping hide from a vat, its edges sloughing like wet parchment. He slaps it onto a wooden beam and begins scraping it with practiced rhythm. The sound is oddly soothing, shh, like someone brushing a giant prehistoric creature. The scent, unfortunately, is not soothing, at all. You instinctively breathe shallowly, which helps, until a gust of wind stirs the air and blows a fresh wave of fumes directly into your face. Your eyes sting. You blink rapidly, looking like you're trying not to cry during a particularly emotional gladiator speech. The tanner pats your shoulder sympathetically. You get used to it, he says. You're not sure you believe him. Nearby, another worker kneels beside a pile of lime-treated hides, turning them carefully so they can dry evenly in the sun. The lime dust puffing up from the fibres adds a chalky note to the smell palette, a kind of bitter sharpness that somehow makes everything else worse. It's impressive, really, how many distinct aromas can coexist and still form one unified olfactory punch. A pair of boys run past carrying jars of urine like they're delivering pastries. One sloshes the jar slightly, sending droplets onto the ground. You decide very calmly to stand absolutely still until they pass. You do not breathe during this time. You simply observe existence. You spot a man smoking meat in a side chamber. Tanneries often doubled as small workshops for leather goods. And for a brief moment you think, a nice smell. It is not a nice smell. It is simply a different level of smoky, meaty confusion layered onto your existing scent trauma. Another soft joke drifts through your mind. If Rome had a deodorant industry, the tanneries would have kept them in business forever. Now that you're deeper in the district, you notice how thick the air is. Even the light seems different here, bending slightly around the haze like it wants to escape. Workers rinse hides in the small runoff channels, sending pale, murky liquid trickling down the street toward you. You sidestep it so quickly you surprise yourself. Truly, nothing improves reflexes like ancient Roman sanitation. A mule stands tied to a post nearby, looking personally offended by the smell, which says a lot considering what you saw it eating earlier. It flicks its ears impatiently and snorts as though expressing solidarity with your suffering. You glance up and see laundry hanging between the buildings, tunics, cloths, blankets, flapping bravely in the tannery wind. You can only imagine what they'll smell like later. Perhaps that's why Romans wore so many layers, protection from life's disappointments. The tanners continue their chores as if nothing is amiss, chatting, laughing, humming. You admire them. Their noses must have the strength of 10 elephants. You slowly continue down the street, letting the tannery haze fade behind you. The air lightens, the smells shift, and your lungs begin to forgive you. Just a little. You exhale long and slow, grateful for the fresh new wave of whatever Rome decides to throw at you next. You drift away from the tannery district, your lungs whispering a quiet, thank you, as the ammonia haze releases its grip. The air is still far from fresh, but compared to where you just were, it almost feels luxurious. You take a deep breath, instantly regret it, and settle back into shallow inhaling. Progress. Ahead, a familiar Roman sound emerges. Laughter, splashing water, and the echo of voices bouncing off stone walls. It's too early in the morning for the baths, and too lively for the forum, which means you're approaching one of ancient Rome's most delightfully communal spaces, the public latrine. Yes, the place where Rome invites citizens to sit side by side, handle their business, and discuss politics while doing it. You're about to enter the social media of ancient sanitation. The smell announces itself first. It's not as sharp as the tanneries, not as metallic as the butchers, and not as fresh as anything you'd willingly encounter. It's rounder, fuller, a scent with presence. You turn into the courtyard and find the latrine nestled behind a row of columns, open to the air, because privacy is a luxury Romans absolutely did not prioritize here. A mainstream historical fact floats gently into your mind. Roman public latrines could have dozens of stone seats arranged in long rows, all connected by running water beneath them. No dividers, no stalls, just you, your neighbours, and a very humbling sense of community. You step closer, and the scene reveals itself like a strange ancient sitcom. Men sit side by side on marble slabs dotted with keyhole-shaped openings. Some chat casually about weather or market gossip. One hums a tune. Another eats a small pastry. Yes, while seated. You try not to stare, but your modern brain is already filing a complaint with HR. A quirky tidbit drifts into your thoughts. Romans used a shared sponge on a stick called a tessorium for cleaning themselves. One sponge, many users, rinsed in a bucket of water that you are now very determined not to look directly at. The idea makes your eyelid twitch. Historians still argue whether wealthier citizens brought their own personal sponges, or if everyone truly shared the same communal one. You choose to believe the comforting version for your own sanity. Someone scoots over on the bench to make room for you. You lift your hands, smiling politely, as if declining an invitation to sit front row at a concert. You're flattered, truly, but emotionally you're not prepared for this level of historical immersion. The man shrugs, unbothered, and returns to telling his friend a long story that involves a goose, a jar of wine, and an unfortunate toga. You walk along the outer wall, observing the little details. The stone seats are smooth from generations of use, polished by countless, cheeks. Beneath them, you hear the faint gurgle of flowing water, Rome's underground sewer doing its quiet, heroic best to carry things away before they accumulate into something tragic. The scent here is thick but mellow. It settles low in the air, clinging to the stone like it never learned how to let go. You lean near one column, taking in the scene. The soft echo of conversation, the splashing of water, the steady background hum of a city that long ago decided privacy was overrated. As you watch, a young boy working as an attendant carries in a bucket of fresh water for the small foot-washing trough near the entrance. He sloshes a bit on the floor, and you instinctively hop backward, narrowly avoiding a future you're not ready to face. He laughs kindly, like he's seen this exact reaction 1,000 times. He probably has. A man finishes his business, stands up, adjusts his tunic, and exits with the proud confidence of someone who just completed an important civic duty. The scent he leaves behind blends perfectly into the existing atmosphere, as if Rome itself says, "Ah yes, another donation." A soft joke arrives in your mind. Public latrines weren't just where Romans relieved themselves, they were where they relieved each other of secrets, gossip, and occasionally money. Honestly, it's kind of like a coffee shop, if everything smelled aggressively different. You glance at the stone gutters running along the floor. Water flows continuously, rinsing away anything that drips or falls. A tangle of mint and rosemary bushes grows outside the courtyard, and every now and then, a breeze carries a faint hint of herbal freshness inside. Trying, failing, but trying. You appreciate the effort. Another man enters holding a small jar of perfume oil. He dabs a tiny bit under his nose before taking a seat, like a soldier preparing for battle. You mentally salute him. That's strategy. A small drainage channel along the back wall leads out toward the street, carrying a steady stream of diluted waste toward the wider sewer system. You watch it for a moment, marveling at how calmly Rome deals with things that would send modern systems into meltdown. The city simply accepts the mess and guides it along like a patient parent. A dog naps in the shade near the entrance, completely unbothered by the smell. It lifts its head briefly when you walk by, sniffs, decides you're not delivering food, and resumes sleeping. You envy that peace. You linger for a moment longer, letting the mingled scents of stone, water, humanity, and faint herbs swirl around your senses. Oddly enough, it's not as terrible as you expected. It's deeply unpleasant, sure, but it has a sleepy communal calm to it, like a strange Roman version of background noise. You exhale, letting the latrine's gentle chaos fade behind you as you continue deeper into the city, carrying with you the lingering scent of ancient conversations you never asked to overhear. You leave the public latrine behind, carrying with you a faint, ghostly reminder of everything that just happened there. It clings to your cloak like a souvenir you absolutely did not ask for. But Rome is generous. It always has something new waiting to greet your senses. And today, the next delight arrives in the form of clay jars lining the edge of the street, some sealed, some open, all of them filled with, well, let's call it liquid opportunity. You've officially entered the realm of the urine economy. The first jar you pass smells sharp enough to make your eyebrows reconsider their position on your face. The air has a tang here, ammonia heavy, strangely clean and dirty at the same time, like someone tried to sanitize the street using only spite and chemistry. A mainstream historical fact gracefully enters your mind. Ancient Rome actually taxed urine. Yes, the Emperor Vespasian famously imposed a tax on public collection pots. People gathered it, sold it, and used it for everything from tanning leather to whitening laundry. You sigh softly, because of course, why shouldn't bodily fluids have their own economic sector? You walk past a row of jars set neatly along a building wall, each one labelled with a small scratch mark. Workers swing by throughout the day to collect the contents and deliver them to various trades. Some jars are nearly overflowing. Some are suspiciously warm. You choose to emotionally detach and not think too deeply about which jar came from which household. A quirky tidbit floats to the surface. Romans believed urine's ammonia content made it an excellent teeth-whitening agent. Some ancient writers even bragged about using imported Portuguese urine for dental hygiene, as if it were a luxury brand. You pause mid-step, staring blankly at nothing, quietly grieving for humanity. Historians still argue whether the urine used in public vats was diluted with water, before processing, or used straight from the source. Your nose votes passionately for dilution. As you continue walking, you spot a fuller's workshop on the left. Fullers were the ancient equivalents of dry cleaners, though calling this dry is a bold choice. Inside, men stomp on clothes in large basins filled with water, clay, lye, and yes, urine. They stomp rhythmically, holding onto ropes strung along the ceiling for balance. Their feet slap and squish with perfect timing, turning laundry day into something between choreography and public endurance event. The smell that wafts out is impressive. You reflexively tilt your head back as though trying to distance your nose from your own body. It doesn't work. One of the fullers catches your eye and waves proudly, like he's inviting you to admire his technique. You lift a thumbs up, which feels like the safest supportive gesture you can muster under olfactory duress. He beams at you and stomps twice as enthusiastically. The splash radius increases. You back up immediately. A bucket sits to the side filled with stridulated runoff from earlier bathers, another ingredient sometimes used in the fuller's mixtures. You hesitate to ask. You already know. Your sleep brain goes, "Ah, exfoliant soup." You nod grimly. You step away. Nearby, a slave stands at a grinding stone, mixing powders used to treat fabric stains. The dust rises into the air and mixes with the acidic scent of the vats. You inhale it, accidentally tasting it. You cough once, politely, as though trying not to disturb a lecture hall. A soft joke pops into your mind. If you ever feel like your job is strange, remember someone in ancient Rome, specialized in sniffing laundry to decide whether it needed more urine. You pass two men loading amphorae onto a cart. Each jar is sealed with wax, but the smell still slips through in thin, determined tendrils. One man claps the other on the back and says, "Good batch today." You wonder if nose fatigue is real, and if so, whether Romans reached that point before breakfast. A narrow alley branches off to your right, lined with shops using ammonia-based mixtures to clean wool. Here, the air feels brighter and sharper, like your nostrils are standing at military attention. You take a slow breath through your teeth, because somehow that helps, and move along the main street instead. The ground underfoot shifts in texture. You notice a pale patch on the stones, stained by constant splashing from the public collection pots. You sidestep it instinctively, like someone dodging a puddle that insists it's harmless but definitely isn't. Up ahead, a man empties a small jar into one of the public pots. He does so casually, like he's donating coins to a fountain. You admire that confidence. He nods at you, proud of his civic contribution. You nod back, proud of yourself for not passing out. A mule cart creaks by, loaded with raw hides destined for tanners. The smell radiates off it in warm waves, an elegant duet of animal fat and ammonia. If you ever wondered what ancient air tasted like, you now have a full sensory profile you never asked for. You take another step, and a breeze stirs the nearby jars. The resulting gust is so astonishingly pungent that your soul briefly leaves your body to file paperwork somewhere quieter. You gather yourself, blinking slowly, letting the world reintegrate around you. And despite everything, the fumes, the jars, the laundry stomping, you find yourself oddly charmed. Rome is messy, but it's also honest. The city doesn't hide its odours. It celebrates them, profits from them, builds entire working-class careers around them. You exhale carefully, letting the ammonia-scented air flow past you like a strange ancient incense, and continue deeper into Rome's olfactory maze. You ease onward, thinking, very naively, that after the tannery fumes, the communal sponge situation, and Rome's ammonia-powered economy, surely the city must be running out of surprises. But no, Rome is a place of endless generosity, and today she has saved one of her most dramatic acts for you. The sewers that burp back. You're still walking along the gently sloped stones when you hear it, an odd hollow glorp rising from somewhere beneath your sandals. You pause, raise an eyebrow, and tilt your head like a confused dog. The sound comes again, a soft bubble, a muffled rumble, a suspicious splash. You slowly step away from the gutter. You've found one of the 1,000 little mouths of the Cloaca Maxima, Rome's famous sewer system. Famous? Yes. Flawless? Not even close. A mainstream historical fact shuffles forward. The Cloaca Maxima was one of the world's earliest large-scale sewer systems, an engineering marvel built to drain marshes and carry waste out of the city. But, and this is important, it was designed long before Rome became a packed megacity full of people, dumping things the engineers never imagined. So every now and then, the sewer pushes back. You lean in slightly because your curious brain insists on understanding what you're dealing with. A warm puff of air rises from the grate. It smells like a combination of wet stone, decomposing whatever stale water, and the faint ancient resentment of everything that's ever been flushed into this city. You jerk your head back before the full scent registers. Too late. You inhale anyway. Your eyes water. Your soul sighs. A quirky tidbit bubbles to the surface. Ancient writers occasionally complained about unwholesome vapours that escape from the sewers, especially on hot days. Some even suggested that certain illnesses wafted up from below, and honestly, standing here now, you believe them wholeheartedly. Historians still argue whether the Cloaca Maxima was primarily a storm drain or a true sewage system. But as you watch a brownish bubble rise from the grate and pop with the confidence of a gladiator entering the arena, you decide the distinction no longer matters. The important thing is, it's breathing, and it's breathing out. A man with a basket on his hip walks past you, offering figs for sale. "Fresh this morning," he calls. You try to smile at him, but your face is too busy recovering from the sewer's enthusiastic greeting. He gives you a sympathetic nod, like he's seen that expression on 1,000 visitors. You continue forward cautiously, sticking to the safe stones as the gutter on your left gurgles ominously. A mule clops past, pauses to sniff the grate, and instantly jerks its head away in offended disbelief. You pat its flank in solidarity. Another glorp erupts from a nearby drain, louder this time, like something large just shifted below. You step back so abruptly you nearly collide with a woman balancing a bundle of linens on her head. She glances at the sewer grate, shrugs, and says, "It does that sometimes." Then she walks on as if the street hasn't just exhaled at you. A soft joke arrives. If the Cloaca Maxima had Yelp, reviews, the description would be useful, but occasionally attacks. You crouch near another drain, not too close, and observe the stonework. The engineers carved channels that funnel waste toward Rome's lowlands, but centuries of use have left everything stained, cracked, and dramatically expressive. In one small grate you notice something shifting. Maybe a rat, maybe a clump of refuse, maybe the ghost of sanitation past. You decide not to wait for a clearer identification. Shops line both sides of the street, cobblers hammering sandals, potters shaping clay, bakers slicing fresh loaves. You can almost pretend the scent from below doesn't exist when the warm smell of bread drifts over. Almost. Then the sewer lets out another sigh, and the bread suddenly doesn't smell as appetizing. A small boy plays with a stick near one of the grates, poking at the runoff trickling toward the drain. just as you open your mouth to say something like, "Hey, maybe don't," the sewer gurgles loudly. The boy drops his stick and sprints away at speeds that defy physics. Clearly this isn't his first rodeo. As you pass under an archway, a faint breeze from the Tiber lifts the edge of your cloak. Merciful, fresh, cleansing. It mingles with the sewer fumes in a strange duel of aromas. The Tiber's scent wins momentarily, washing away some of the heaviness, but the Cloaca Maxima stays competitive. It's a seasoned fighter. You take another step, then freeze as you hear a low, wet rumble behind you. You turn just in time to see a small splash push up through a nearby grate and drizzle onto the stones. You exhale through your teeth, a survival instinct evolution never prepared you for. A group of workers carrying tools heads toward the main sewer entrance, farther down the street. One of them shouts something about another blockage. You salute them internally. Their bravery is unmatched, their sandals probably doomed. A particularly fragrant bubble rises near your foot. You step away with ballet-like precision, more gracefully than you've ever moved in your life. Rome is teaching you agility in the most chaotic ways. And just when you think this is your final sewer encounter, you walk past a large central drain that releases one last, monumental puff, an aromatic farewell kiss of warm, gaseous history. You breathe out very slowly, very gently, very through your mouth. Then you continue down the street, wiser, humbler, and significantly more respectful of ancient plumbing. You leave the sewer's dramatic farewell behind, stepping into a stretch of road that, at first, seems calmer. The air feels momentarily lighter, almost pleasant, and you dare to hope you've earned a small break. Rome, however, is a city built on the principle of never let them relax, and as you move closer to the next cluster of stalls, the hopeful part of your brain begins to shrivel. Because now you're heading straight into the food markets, where the smells are bold, unfiltered, and surprisingly competitive. At first you detect something promising. Bread, garlic, fresh herbs. Your senses perk up, hopeful. But then, like someone flipping a page in a very questionable cookbook, the smell shifts sharply into fish. Very old fish. The kind of fish that looks at you from the table and begs you to avert your eyes and your lungs. You approach slowly, cautiously, like you're negotiating with destiny. A mainstream historical fact pops neatly into your mind. Ancient Roman markets didn't have refrigeration, obviously. But somehow, that fact hits harder when you're standing 3 feet away from a pile of sardines that appear to have lost their sense of purpose yesterday. They're arranged on the counter with a kind of resigned dignity, as though hoping that presentation alone will save them. It will not. The vendor waves at you cheerfully. "Fresh catch from Ostia," he declares. You do not question his definition of fresh. You simply nod, the polite nod of someone who values social harmony more than honesty. Behind him, another stall displays cuts of tuna. Some look passable, some do not. Flies circle like enthusiastic customers. You realize Rome's food markets are very democratic. Everything gets attention, whether it deserves it or not. A quirky tidbit enters your mind. Romans adored garum, a fermented fish sauce made by leaving fish guts to rot in the sun for weeks. Rot was the entire recipe. You look at the fish scraps on the table and think, yes, this checks out. Someone nearby shakes a sealed jar, and a pungent whiff escapes like a tiny ghost with attitude. You inhale and experience an entire emotional journey. Historians still argue whether garum factories caused major stench problems, or if the smell was considered normal, even pleasing, by ancient noses. Your nose strongly disagrees with the latter theory. You move past the fish stalls thinking you've survived the worst. You have not. Next comes produce. Baskets of figs, olives, dates, grapes. Some look plump and beautiful. Others are past their prime. Very past. The kind of fruit that squishes before you even touch it. The scent is a blend of sweetness, fermentation, and quiet regret. A vendor slices open a melon to show its ripeness. The scent bursts out so forcefully that you take half a step back. Not bad, just aggressive. The sweetness clings to the air like syrup. You're starting to think maybe this section isn't so terrible after all. Then you reach the fish gut pile. Every market has one, the catch-all spot where vendors toss scraps they can't sell. Here, guts, heads, bones, and unidentifiable sea pieces form a small mound that seems to radiate its own weather system. A breeze passes over it and delivers a powerful message directly to your face. You reel back, blinking rapidly. It's not even the smell itself, it's the intensity. It hits you like a salty slap from Neptune himself. A man with a broom casually sweeps around the mound, pushing some of it into a drainage channel that leads toward the river. The river will not be improved by this. You head toward the meat and cheese section, grateful for the change. Or so you think. A row of cheeses sits proudly in the sun. You have never seen cheeses this committed to their identities. Some ooze gently over the boards. Some have developed rinds so funky they may qualify as living organisms. A goat cheese emits a faint aroma that makes you think of damp caves and philosophical goats. A soft joke pops into your sleepy brain. If scent were a gladiator sport, Roman cheese would win by knockout in the first round. You wander past a cheese wheel that looks older than half the senators. A man slices off a piece, offers it to a customer, and the customer nods approvingly. You marvel at their bravery. Moving on, you pass a stall selling honey cakes. Finally, something lovely. The sweetness drifts toward you like a little blessing. You lean in, inhaling the warm, comforting scent of honey and flaxseed. For a moment, your nose relaxes. Your shoulders drop. You think, this is nice. Rome can be nice. Then a jar of garum opens behind you. The smell sweeps past like an ancient ocean monster, trying to claw its way back to relevance. You close your eyes. You accept your fate. A group of children runs by holding skewers of grilled meat sold by a street vendor. The smell of smoke and fat joins the fray, warm and familiar. Finally, something normal. The smoke dances upward in lazy spirals, blending with the sharper smells around it, creating a strange harmony you didn't expect to appreciate. A dog wanders between the stalls, nose twitching non-stop, tail wagging, confident it will find something delicious dropped by accident. Judging from the ground, it will not have to wait long. You watch a woman haggle with a vendor over wilted greens. He insists they're very fresh. She points at them with the expression of someone who has absolutely caught him lying. They laugh together anyway. It's Rome. Buying food is also buying conversation. And as you continue drifting down the market street surrounded by spices, fruits, fish, smoke, and sweet cakes, you feel the chaotic scent tapestry weaving itself around you. It's overwhelming, ridiculous, and yet deeply alive. Rome never hides what it is, and in its own strange way, that makes everything feel beautifully real. You ease your way out of the chaos of the food market, carrying traces of its scents with you. Sweet fruit, stubborn fish, heroic cheese, and the haunting whisper of garum that absolutely did not need to be that enthusiastic. You breathe out slowly, hoping the air ahead will be kinder. It is not. Because now you're drifting toward another famed Roman institution, the public bathhouses. And while you might think, finally, something clean, Rome smiles gently and says, "Oh, sweet summer child." Even from a distance you feel the change in the air. It's humid, thick, and warm, like stepping into the breath of a giant who enjoys eucalyptus and questionable hygiene equally. The steam rising from the open vents curls upward in soft ribbons, carrying with it the scent of heated stone, oils, sweat, and centuries of people who believed bathing was a group activity best enjoyed loudly. As you approach the entrance, the murmur of voices grows louder, men greeting friends, attendants shouting instructions, someone arguing about the temperature of the caldarium as if it's a matter of life and death. The baths are Rome's social hubs, gym, spa, barbershop, gossip centre, and philosophical debate arena all rolled into one, and they smell like it. A mainstream historical fact drifts through your mind with the weight of steam. Roman bathhouses weren't just for bathing. They included exercise yards, massage rooms, reading corners, and snack stalls. People spent hours here, sometimes the whole day, which means a lot of bodies, sweaty ones, oiled ones, recently exercised ones, relaxed ones, and fragrant ones. You step inside the first chamber, instantly enveloped in warm, damp air that hugs your skin like a clingy toga. The temperature nudges your nose awake, enhancing every single smell in the atmosphere. You inhale gently, knowing full well that gentleness won't save you. The scent here is complicated. Floral oils, mineral water, wet limestone, stale steam, and the unmistakable note of humanity at its most enthusiastic. It's not bad exactly, just bold, determined, committed to existing. A man brushes past you, glistening with olive oil freshly scraped from a workout. You catch a waft of him, warm, earthy, herbal, and something else that reminds you of a gym towel that retired 5 years ago. He greets you with a cheerful nod, completely unfazed by his own aroma. You admire his confidence. A quirky tidbit rises to the surface. Bathers used a tool called a strigil to scrape dirt, sweat and oil from their skin instead of lathering with soap. The mixture of removed grime, called strigilis sludge by modern scholars, not officially but spiritually, was sometimes collected and sold to apothecaries for medicinal or cosmetic concoctions. You shudder delicately. Historians still argue whether bathhouse water was changed frequently, or whether it maintained a sort of seasoned broth quality over time. Judging by the pale, swirling opacity of the pool in front of you, you lean toward the broth theory. You watch as a group of men enter the pool with a splash, laughing as they settle into the warm water. One shakes droplets from his hair, sending a mist of bath-scented steam your way. You hold your breath for 3 seconds, then bravely resume inhaling. An attendant walks past with a tray of small cakes. Yes, people ate in the bathhouse. Why? Because Rome believed leisure and snacks should be inseparable. You spot a man nibbling a honey biscuit while reclining in the tepidarium, and his level of relaxation is unsettlingly aspirational. The deeper you walk, the more the smells shift. In the apoditerium, the changing room, you catch hints of damp wool, sweat-soaked tunics, and sandalwood oil rubbed on skin. Cloaks hang from hooks, some smelling freshly laundered, others deeply historical. You drift toward the caldarium, the hottest room where steam clouds fill the air so thickly you feel like you're inhaling warm fog flavored with eucalyptus, perspiration, and ambition. Men sit on stone benches, glistening from heat, chatting as though the temperature isn't trying to melt them. Suddenly a gust of cooler air hits your back as someone opens a door leading to the frigidarium, the cold plunge. The shock of temperature difference sends a wave of new smells swirling past. Cold water, old stone, and a faint mineral tang like mountain springs filtered through centuries of rooftop runoff. A soft joke surfaces in your weary mind. If a modern spa smelled like this, they'd call it historically immersive and charge extra. You follow a group of bathers toward the massage room, where attendants work with oils thick enough to double as paint. The air here smells floral, spicy, resinous, and under all that, the unmistakable undertone of bodies that have been sweating for hours. One attendant massages a client's shoulder with rhythmic pressure, sending occasional oil droplets flicking into the air. You step aside to avoid becoming part of the skincare routine. You wander toward a window where the steam escapes in a steady plume. Outside, fresh air trickles in, mixing with the bathhouse aroma in a way that makes everything temporarily bearable. You lean into the fresh air, savouring every molecule. Then someone behind you opens a jar of perfume oil, strong, musky, used to mask the lingering scent of the bath. The aroma pounces on you instantly, blending awkwardly with the humidity. Now you smell steam, sweat, olive oil, sandalwood and musk wrestling each other in your sinuses. You sigh emotionally, and yet, somehow, it's not entirely unpleasant. The bathhouse has a warm, communal, sleepy rhythm. Men chatting softly, water lapping gently, steam shifting like lazy ghosts, and scents weaving through the air like ancient memories. It's overwhelming, ridiculous, and strangely comforting. Rome is messy, but it's also deeply human. You exhale, letting the bathhouse scents settle into the background hum of your journey and drift back toward the street, where, somehow, the outside air now smells almost fresh. Almost. You step out of the bathhouse feeling like a lightly steamed dumpling, warm, slightly damp, and carrying the faint scent of herbs, sweat, and someone else's sandalwood oil. The outside air hits your face with a surprising clarity. For one glorious second, you actually think, oh wow, Rome smells pretty okay right now. Then the wind shifts. A sharp, chemical tang cuts through the mellow bathhouse haze like an arrow aimed at your sinuses. It's strong, unmistakable, and very, very specific. You follow the scent like someone following smoke into a forest. Cautious, a bit regretful, but too curious to stop. That's when you see it. A row of low, rectangular workshops, each venting out warm, ammonia-scented air. Workers beat bundles of soaking cloth rhythmically with wooden paddles. White foam sloshes over the edges of vats. The ground is slick, shimmering slightly. You've found Rome's Folonicae, the industrial laundries. Welcome to the place where clothes come to get clean, using a process your modern mind absolutely wishes it did not know about. A mainstream historical fact floats in with perfect, inconvenient timing. Roman launderers used human urine, yes, collected from the public pots you passed earlier, as a key cleaning agent. The ammonia in pee breaks down grease and stains, and here, in these workshops, that science is happening in loud, wet, aromatic real time. The smell intensifies as you step closer. There's not the pure, sharp urine smell from the collection jars. This is different, mixed with soap-like clays, mineral powders, heat, and the persistent scent of wet wool. It hits you low in the throat. You swallow hard. Inside the largest workshop, men stand ankle-deep in vats, stomping clothes with all the enthusiasm of grape crushers in a wine festival. Except the liquid swirling around their legs is not wine. They grip ropes hanging from the ceiling, using them to maintain balance as they stomp, 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 churning the fabric into foamy waves. One worker catches your eye, flashes a tired smile, and stomps twice as forcefully as if to demonstrate proper technique. You give him a supportive nod, the kind of nod you'd give someone running a marathon through an obstacle course made entirely of smells. A quirky tidbit rises to the top of your mind. Fullers sometimes added volcanic ash or special clays to the vats to brighten fabrics. And while this part is genuinely kind of clever, it does nothing to counteract the dominant aroma of the room. The mixture smells like wet limestone, warm ammonia, and regret. Historians still argue whether workers rinsed the clothes thoroughly before drying them, or whether garments carried a faint, lingering Follonica fragrance out into the world. Judging from the steam drifting toward you, you suspect the debate might never be resolved. A young apprentice walks by with a bucket full of spent cleaning liquid. It sloshes dangerously close to your feet. You execute a sideways hop so swift and elegant that for a moment you feel like a ballerina fleeing a chemistry experiment. The apprentice smirks. He's seen this move before. You step deeper into the workshop's shadow, watching the next part of the process. After the stomping, workers rinse the clothes in long stone basins where clearer water trickles constantly from thin spouts. The scent here is calmer. Water, stone, faint mineral notes. But underneath it all, the ammonia ghost lingers. One worker takes a tunic from the rinse basin and lays it flat on a board. Using a metal tool, he presses and stretches it with practiced ease. Another massages the fabric with oil to soften it. A third shakes out a cloak so vigorously that droplets spray into the air. You immediately duck. You do not want to participate. Nearby, a handful of workers tend a series of drying racks set in the sun. Clothes hang neatly, fluttering in the breeze. The wind carries their scents outward, part clean, part sour, part floral from leftover perfume, part laundry vat reality. You inhale cautiously. It's better than inside the workshop, but still very expressive. You catch sight of a woman delivering a basket of clothing from a wealthy household. She greets the workers with familiarity, placing the basket down gently. They bow their heads in acknowledgement. You realize fullers weren't just cleaners. They were trusted caretakers of garments, especially expensive ones. Every stain, every crease, every bit of wear passed through their hands. The woman unrolls a delicate white tunic embroidered with crimson thread. The workers whistle appreciatively. They'll treat it with special mixtures, chalky clays, softening oils, water warmed by the sun, and yes, a little ammonia. You feel emotionally attached to that tunic now. You hope it survives. A soft joke drifts into your sleepy thoughts. If ancient Rome had a commercial jingle, the fullers would probably sing brighter whites, bolder colours, as long as you don't ask what's in the vat. A dog trots through the alley, sniffs the workshop doorway, sneezes dramatically, and continues on without hesitation. You relate to the dog on a deep spiritual level. A worker invites you to step closer and feel the texture of a freshly washed cloth. You appreciate the gesture, but decline politely, mostly because your hand is still traumatized by everything your nose has endured today. Steam rises from the stone basins, curling into the morning sun, shimmering with the faint scent of minerals and the unmistakable tang of ammonia. In a strange way, it's almost soothing. The rhythmic stomping, the splashing water, the chatter of workers. It all feels like part of Rome's daily heartbeat. You exhale slowly, letting the Fullerniker's layered scent blend into the tapestry of everything you've smelled today. It's overwhelming, yes, but it's also honest, real, and undeniably Roman. You step back onto the street, grateful for even slightly fresher air, and drift deeper into the waking city once more. You step away from the laundries with a kind of weary dignity, your nose battered, your cloak lightly perfumed with everything except what you'd consider pleasant, and your spirit somewhere between acceptance and mild resignation. The street ahead narrows again, curving toward a cluster of older insulae, and for the briefest moment there is calm. Then you smell it. It's not a sharp scent, not aggressive like the tanner is, not bold like the bathhouse steam, not acidic like the fuller's vats. This one is slow, heavy, a smell that settles, sits, and refuses to leave. It rolls into your senses like a fog of old leftovers and forgotten corners. You've reached the garbage mounds. Rome had garbage collectors, yes, but not nearly enough of them, and they didn't always reach every neighbourhood. So the city, being the very flexible creature it was, simply adapted. People left piles of refuse along the edges of streets, tucked into alleys, stacked near walls, or heaped beside staircases. Anything that wasn't valuable, edible, reusable, or easily burned went here. You approach the first mound cautiously. It leans against a cracked wall, almost organic in shape, like it's trying to become part of the architecture. Bits of pottery shards glint in the sun, broken amphorae, wilted vegetable peels, old straw, bone fragments, cloth scraps, something that might have been a sandal in its past life but now looks like a philosophical statement about decay. A mainstream historical fact pops into your mind. Rome recycled a surprising amount of its waste. Metal was melted down, glass was reworked, bone became tools, even some pottery was ground up for building materials, but the things that couldn't be repurposed, they ended up right here, waiting for anyone to deal with them. A cart rolls past you, its wheels clattering as two tired men shovel small piles of refuse into the back. They're the lucky ones whose routes get serviced. The men nod at you, sweat dripping down their foreheads, and one wipes his brow with a cloth that frankly has seen too much. A quirky tidbit bubbles up. Some neighbourhoods hired private crews to sweep the streets. The poorer districts relied on either overworked city workers or gravity. Yes, gravity. Sloped streets meant rain could wash trash downhill to riverbanks or open fields, where it promptly formed new garbage mounds. Nature's conveyor belt. Historians still argue whether certain districts stank worse than others based on class divisions or simply geography. But looking at the street right now, you suspect the answer is yes. A dog rummages through one pile, wagging its tail as it discovers an ancient treasure, a chicken bone of unknown vintage. The dog gnaws happily, unconcerned. You respect its resilience. You step carefully around the mound and immediately bump into another smaller pile tucked between two buildings. This one has a more concentrated scent, less general, more specific. You lean in slightly, against your better judgment, and yes, this is the fish market's leftovers, recognizable even in decay. You step back quickly. The wind shifts slightly, carrying the odor of fermented fruit from another pile down the street. It's sour, sticky, sweet, in the way only spoiled fruit can be. Your nose twitches involuntarily. Children run past, chasing each other with sticks, perfectly unfazed by the environment. One hops over a small pile with the effortless grace of someone who grew up learning that garbage is just another landscape feature. A soft joke bubbles up. In Rome, taking out the trash sometimes just meant gently moving it 2 feet to the left. You wander further, noticing that each mound seems to have its own personality. One looks mostly like broken pottery. Another looks like a failed experiment in composting. Another seems to be made mostly of ashes and charred wood, probably from a baker's oven sweepings. The city breathes through these piles, exhaling the remnants of yesterday's life. A woman tosses a handful of wilted herbs onto one heap, dusting her hands off efficiently before walking away. She doesn't even glance at the pile, as though it's just another neighbour she's not interested in engaging with. Flies hum lazily in the warm air, drifting between piles like tiny winged critics deciding which mound deserves their attention today. A few settle on the rim of a broken jar. You wave them away out of instinct, but they return immediately, having no respect for your personal space. A half-collapsed wooden crate catches your eye. Inside it, a family of mice scurries into hiding. One pauses to stare at you, whiskers twitching. You stare back with the mutual understanding of two creatures who did not ask to be here, but are making the best of it. The stones under your sandals shift slightly as you step around an especially large pile. Something soft squishes. You do not investigate. You simply accept that Rome has won this round. A pair of municipal sweepers approaches, carrying brooms made of bundled twigs. They begin pushing the outer layer of refuse into a waiting cart. The process is slow, almost meditative. Sweep, lift, dump, sweep again. The smell rises in waves, but the workers barely react. Their noses, hardened by decades of Rome's olfactory personality, have evolved beyond mortal limitations. One worker glances at you. "Rain later," he mutters. "Good day for cleanup." You consider what constitutes a good day here, and decide the bar is beautifully flexible. You continue walking, the garbage mounds slowly thinning out as you move toward a better-maintained street. The air freshens bit by bit. Not clean, exactly, but breathable. Manageable. Slightly less assertive. Rome's trash fades behind you, becoming just another layer in the city's grand mosaic of smells. You exhale, letting the scent drift off your senses as you step forward into whatever the city has prepared for you next. You drift forward, leaving behind the lumpy, fragrant geography of Rome's garbage mounds. Your sandals tap across stones that feel almost clean by comparison. The air shifts again, less sour, less heavy, and for a fleeting second, you feel hopeful. Maybe Rome is finally giving your nose a break. Then the sky above dims, not from clouds, but from a drifting haze, thin, greyish, shimmering. A faint, acrid scent slides into your nostrils, smoky, oily, bitter. You blink up at the air and realise exactly where you're heading. Rome is cooking something. And by cooking, I mean burning questionable fuels everywhere at once. You've reached the part of the city where chimneys, braziers, kitchen hearths, blacksmith forges, lampstands, and random alley fires join forces to create a single, unified atmospheric event, the smoke of low-grade fuels. The first scent that hits you is wood smoke, but not the soft, comforting kind. This is scrap wood, scavenged from old crates or leftover construction debris, burning hot and uneven, sending out dry, splintery smoke that scratches the back of your throat. A mainstream historical fact tiptoes into your mind. Most Romans didn't have access to high-quality firewood. Expensive hardwoods were reserved for wealthier households, bathhouse furnaces, or major public bake ovens. Everyone else burned whatever they could find: sticks, brush, scraps, and, yes, dried animal dung. You inhale, immediately regret it. A new scent rolls in behind the wood, something earthy, sharp, and distinctly barnyard-esque. You cough softly. Somewhere nearby, someone is heating a morning stew over dung fuel, one of Rome's most ubiquitous energy sources. It burns surprisingly efficiently, and smells exactly like what it is. A soft breeze stirs the haze, carrying the soot across your face in a gentle, affectionate slap. You blink the sting out of your eyes. A quirky tidbit flickers in your thoughts. Some poorer families burned old olive oil that had gone rancid. They used it in lamps, they cooked with it, they cleaned with it. And when burned, it released a smell so potent that even the donkeys refused to walk through it. You smell it now. An acrid, greasy tang, riding on the wind like a tiny ghost from a forgotten kitchen. Historians still argue whether Rome's air pollution rivaled modern industrial cities, or if ancient winds managed to carry most of it away. Standing here, surrounded by smoke thick enough to butter toast, you feel confident adding your own scholarly input. Rome absolutely cooked its air. A group of cooks stands outside a small tavern, tending a grill. The smoke from the charcoal, if you can generously call it charcoal, billows upward in dense grey clouds. There's meat sizzling on the grate, and the smell of roasting fat is almost delicious. Almost. But it's layered over smoke so heavy your nostrils feel physically weighed down. One cook flips a skewer, beaming proudly. He fans the smoke toward the street, unintentionally or intentionally seasoning every passerby. You nod politely, your eyes tear up. The cook winks, misinterpreting your reaction as admiration. Farther down the street, a blacksmith's forge roars. Sparks leap into the air like tiny fireflies having an emotional meltdown. The fumes here are metallic, hot iron, burning coal, and sweaty muscle. You watch a man hammer a glowing bar of metal, steam rising from his skin with every strike. The smell is harsh, fierce, confident. The kind of smell that tells you, yes, I have inhaled this every day for 20 years and I'm doing fine. You step away carefully, not entirely convinced. A soft joke drifts into your sleepy thoughts. If Rome ever invented scented candles, they would probably smell like forest fire memories or essence of hot forge. As you turn into another alley, the haze shifts colour slightly, more yellow now and heavier. A woman tends a clay stove, burning crushed olive pits left over from pressing oil. They burn hot and long, but the smell is like roasting bitterness itself. She waves her hand in front of her face to reposition the smoke, then shrugs as if accepting that air simply does this sometimes. A boy runs past carrying a bronze lamp filled with low-grade oil. The flame flickers wildly, producing dark soot that spirals upward like a snake made of smoke. He holds the lamp carefully to avoid spilling the oil. Judging by the smell, you understand why even a small spill would haunt the area for days. You notice the walls around you, soot-stained, streaked from years of rising smoke, each stone wearing the city's breath like a permanent tattoo. Even the statues have a thin grey film along their noses and brows, as if Rome has been gently exhaling onto them for centuries. A mule trudges through the haze, snorting grumpily. It shakes its head and sneezes, violently before plodding onward. You sympathise. The air grows thicker again as several households prepare morning meals. You smell boiling barley, frying fish, burnt crusts scraped from an oven, and something that might be onions, or might be someone burning yesterday's onions to make room for today's. The odours mingle with smoke until the entire street becomes one long, warm, aromatic hallway of culinary confusion. You pass a man lighting a brazier for warmth. The flames sputter as they catch on poorly cured firewood, sending sparks into the fog and releasing another round of woody, peppery smoke. He coughs twice, shrugs, and settles down beside it anyway. Rome's air surrounds you, smothers you, welcomes you, insults you. And yet, in the midst of all this soot and haze, the city feels alive, breathing its smoky heartbeat into every corner, every stone, every passerby. You exhale slowly, letting the burn in your throat fade into something warm and strangely cozy. Somehow, impossibly, the smoke becomes part of Rome's charm. You drift forward through the smoky air until the haze thins just enough for you to see your surroundings clearly again. The stones under your sandals grow darker, slicker, and a faint heaviness settles in the air. An earthy, sour weight that clings to your skin. You slow your steps, because experience has taught you. When Rome smells like this, something unfortunate is waiting ahead. And there it is, a shape slumped near the edge of the street, then another, and another farther down. At first glance you think they're bundles of discarded cloth, maybe old sacks left behind by a merchant. But as you lean in, the truth becomes clear. You've wandered into one of Rome's many dead animal zones, small, unofficial drop-off points where carcasses were left until someone had the time, energy, or incentive to drag them away. The smell confirms it. It's not the overwhelming punch of rot, not yet. It's the thick, meaty, slightly sour scent of things just beginning their transformation back into the earth. A smell that creeps, settles low, and spreads quietly, like a rumour no one wants to acknowledge. A mainstream historical fact surfaces. Rome did have workers responsible for removing dead animals from the streets. They even had official job titles. But with thousands of animals in the city, donkeys, mules, horses, pigs, goats, chickens, things slipped through the cracks. Some animals collapsed during work. Others were hit by carts. Some simply aged out of existence. And their bodies didn't always get prompt attention. You stand before a small mule, once sturdy and proud, now lying on its side, legs stiff, eyes dimmed. Someone placed a broken piece of roof tile over its belly, maybe to signal that the body had already been noticed by a collector. or maybe to keep the dogs from getting overly ambitious. Speaking of dogs, one trots up, sniffs the air, then approaches the carcass with casual curiosity. It takes a tentative nibble at the ear, then recoils as though the mule scolded it from beyond the grave. The dog sneezes dramatically and wanders off. You admire its honesty. A quirky tidbit rises to the surface. Some Roman sources mention professional scavenger crews made of freedmen and slaves who dragged carcasses to designated dumping grounds outside the city. But in many neighbourhoods, especially poorer ones, locals handled things themselves, sometimes by dragging a body to the nearest open space, sometimes by letting nature work things out. Historians still argue whether scavenger birds played a major role in urban cleanup or were simply opportunistic visitors. But as a shadow passes overhead, and you glance up to see a buzzard circling lazily, you get the feeling the scholars might be underestimating just how helpful Rome's airborne cleanup crew was. Another carcass lies near a doorway, a pig this time, already missing a chunk from its hind leg. You don't ask questions, you don't want answers. A few flies buzz lazily over it, tracing slow spirals in the warm air. Their drone becomes a low, constant hum, blending with the distant chatter of merchants and the faint clatter of carts rolling over stones. You breathe through your mouth. It helps. Barely. A shopkeeper stands outside her doorway, hands on hips, staring at the carcass like it personally offended her entire bloodline. Should have been picked up yesterday, she mutters, giving it a half-hearted kick, just enough to show dominance, not enough to accomplish anything. She catches your eye, shrugs, and goes back inside. As you walk on, the smell thickens slightly, meat warming in the sun, fur beginning to slough, a heavy undertone of decay that hasn't quite committed yet. It's the middle stage, unpleasant, but not catastrophic. You silently thank every deity you can name that it's not midsummer. That would be an olfactory supernova. A soft joke bubbles up in your tired brain. In Rome, even the dead animals were punctual contributors to the city's aroma budget. Up ahead, two men are dragging a carcass toward a cart. They grunt in rhythm, pausing every few steps to wipe sweat from their brows. You watch as they heave the animal, another mule heavier than it looks, into the back of the wagon. The workers tie it down, climb aboard, and move on to the next pickup point like invisible janitors for the city's forgotten corners. A small chicken lies nearby, clearly trampled by accident. It's fresh, so fresh in fact that a cat bravely approaches it, sniffs, and immediately begins nibbling. The cat glances at you once, as if daring you to interrupt its brunch. You nod respectfully and keep walking. You spot a narrow runoff channel where water trickles from a nearby fountain. The stream flows under one of the carcasses, creating a thin ribbon of diluted blood water creeping along the gutter. You step around it carefully, grateful that your reflexes have become sharp enough to avoid most ancient hazards. Around the next bend, a goat carcass has already surrendered half its hair to the breeze. A pair of children poke it with sticks, not out of cruelty, just curiosity. A woman nearby scolds them gently, shooing them away before they accidentally invent tetanus. The deeper you go, the more you see the city adjusting around the problem. A vendor has placed his cart farther from the carcass pile than he normally would. A pair of women have shifted their laundry basket to the other side of the street. People step around the bodies with practiced ease, barely looking down like navigating puddles after a rainstorm. This is Rome. Life and death coexist constantly, openly, visibly, matter-of-factly. The smell follows you, fading slowly with each step until it becomes a background hum instead of the main event. You take a long breath through your nose. It's not pleasant, but it's manageable. The city's chaotic scent mosaic accepts the decaying notes and tucks them gently into its ever-present, always-shifting harmony. You move on, letting the weight of that heavy, earthy odour loosen its grip on your senses as the street opens up to the next strange, unforgettable smell Rome has in store. You drift onward, relieved to feel the heaviness of the dead animal district slowly loosening its grip on your nose. The air ahead lightens, not clean exactly, but shifting into something less existential. You inhale tentatively, tasting dust, stone, and a faint mineral tang that hints at water nearby. And then you hear it. The slosh of buckets, the creak of leather straps, the heavy uneven footsteps of someone carrying a very uneven load. You're approaching one of ancient Rome's most essential daily presences, the water carriers. Before aqueduct-fed fountains, before the privileged households with private plumbing, before the wealthy with their personal cisterns and pipes, everyone else relied on these workers to haul water from public basins to homes, shops, taverns, and workshops. And the scent that surrounds them? Well, it's complicated. The first water carrier you see is a wiry man balancing two enormous amphorae suspended from a wooden yoke across his shoulders. The amphorae sway with each step, splashing rhythmically, creating a trail of small droplets behind him. You follow the droplets with your eyes and notice how slowly they dry, because this water, it's not exactly mountain spring pristine. A mainstream historical fact drifts into your thoughts. Although Rome's aqueducts were engineering marvels, the water arriving at local basins wasn't always perfect. Algae, minerals, street dust, and whatever happened to fall into the fountain, accidentally or deliberately, all influenced its scent. And once water was poured into amphorae, carried across dusty streets and stored in clay jars, well, it gained character. A waft of that character reaches you now, a mix of damp clay, stale minerals, and something faintly metallic. Not terrible, but definitely not something you'd bottle and sell as eau de aqua Claudia. The carrier passes you with a determined grunt. His tunic is damp from splashes. His skin glistens with sweat. And as he moves past, you catch the complex scent of his cargo, water tinged with clay, iron, street dust, and the faint musk of amphorae that haven't been scrubbed to your standards in ever. You step aside as another water carrier approaches, this one a young woman with a large jug balanced expertly on her hip. Water ripples inside it with a soft glugging sound. She pauses near a shop and pours some into a basin, splashing generously onto the ground. The splash hits the stones and releases an earthy, slightly sour smell that reminds you, unpleasantly, of what happens when water sits too long in warm, cramped containers. A quirky tidbit surfaces. Some carriers added tiny amounts of herbs, mint, rosemary, sometimes even lavender, to mask the off-smells of older amphorae. And though they meant well, the result was often a scent that combined floral sweetness with clay-soaked mineral-heavy water in a way your brain is not prepared to categorize. As another bucketful spills near your sandals, you get a noseful of exactly that, an oddly refreshing yet dusty bouquet, like walking through a garden that hasn't been watered in 2 weeks while someone spritzes it with ancient fountain runoff. You take a careful step sideways. Historians still argue whether the lower classes had consistent access to clean drinking water, or mostly relied on boiled, flavoured or mixed brews like Posca to avoid the taste and smell of imperfect water. But as you watch a carrier refill a tavern's barrel from a large stone cistern, and see the faint green sheen floating on top, you feel your own scholarly opinion forming in real time. A small cart nearby sells cups of aqua mulsa, water mixed with honey. The vendor stirs the mixture with a wooden ladle. The honey perfumes the air beautifully until you smell the water beneath it. It's like someone added a spoon of flowers to a bucket of ancient pond dreams. You appreciate the effort, though. A mule trudges past dragging 2 water barrels on a small platform. The barrels slosh loudly, and the mule seems deeply unimpressed by the entire performance. A splash escapes one of the barrels, hitting the ground with a warm, heavy smack. Immediately, the stones release a faint, earthy scent, damp dust, clay, and whatever bacterial community has claimed this neighbourhood as home. You lift your sandals just in time. A group of children gather around a fountain, collecting water in small clay pitchers. They laugh as they splash one another, oblivious to the slightly murky tinge in the water. One boy leans over the fountain edge, cupping his hands to drink. A woman nearby shouts at him to stop. Use the cup, not your hands, which tells you that even in ancient Rome everyone believed they had better hygiene advice than everyone else. A soft joke floats through your mind. In Rome, ordering water without sediment would have been considered a luxury request. You watch a tavern owner dip a ladle into his water jar. The ladle comes up with tiny particles floating inside. Dust, bits of straw, something greenish you decide not to identify. He shrugs, pours it into a pot, and adds wine. Problem solved. Another carrier arrives, this one wheeling an impressive contraption, a small handcart fitted with 2 wooden tubs. The tubs wobble as the wheels bounce over the uneven stones. Every wobble releases a puff of moist, mineral-heavy scent, mixed with the earthy fragrance of damp timber. You breathe it in cautiously. It's not pleasant, but compared to dead animals and ammonia vats, it's almost comforting. You notice too how water carriers constantly compete for space with carts, animals and pedestrians. One nearly collides with a donkey. Both parties exchange annoyed noises. Another slips on a wet patch, steadies herself and keeps going without missing a beat. Rome's workers were tough in every way that mattered, including olfactory resilience. As you make your way through the district, you start to notice how the smells layer. Damp clay, dusty stone warmed by sun, slightly stale water, faint algae, sweat from the carriers, a whiff of herbs here and there, and a surprising note of freshness from fountains where the water flows freely. It's messy. It's imperfect. But it's the lifeblood of the city, carried in amphorae that have seen 1,000 mornings just like this. You listen to the rhythmic splash of water, the creak of wooden yokes, the grunt of effort, and the soft murmurs of workers delivering the most basic necessity to every corner of Rome. And despite everything, the murkiness, the sour notes, the clay-scented splashes, you feel a strange kind of appreciation. This water keeps the city alive. It feeds families, cools brows, quenches thirst, washes faces, fills cooking pots, and occasionally tries to drown your sandals. You exhale, letting the water-scented breeze soften as you step deeper into the city, ready for whatever Rome decides to smell like next. You leave the sloshing rhythm of the water carriers behind, stepping into a neighborhood where the streets narrow again. Tall insulae rising on both sides like crooked stone cliffs. The shade cools the air, but don't be fooled. Rome has no interest in giving you a pleasant break. In fact, the moment you enter this canyon of tightly packed apartments, your nose senses something ominous. The air grows heavier, funkier, damp with a suspicious undercurrent. You inhale gently, very gently, and realize exactly what's happening here. You've entered the realm of crowded tenements leaking waste. Insulae, the apartment buildings where most Romans lived, weren't built for comfort. They were built fast, cheap, and tall, and when several families share one building, one staircase, one courtyard, and one overburdened drainage pipe, well, things happen. Smelly things, persistent things. The first scent that greets you is old water, stale, mineral-heavy, pooling somewhere it shouldn't. Then comes the smell of garbage that didn't quite make it to the pile you passed earlier. Then a sour note, faint but sharp, drifting down from above. You look up. Clotheslines crisscross between buildings, flapping tunics and sheets brushing the air like lazy birds. Pots sit on windowsills. Clay jugs lean precariously. And here and there, you spot a bucket that makes your eyelids twitch with concern. A mainstream historical fact slides gently into your thoughts. Many insulae didn't have internal plumbing. Most residents carried their waste in jars or pots and emptied them in the street, or onto it. Sometimes through designated chutes, but often just out the window when they were feeling bold or sleepy. You tighten your grip on your cloak and instinctively move toward the middle of the street. Above you, someone coughs. A shutter creaks. A voice calls out. Then, from far up on the 5th floor, water suddenly splashes out, hitting the stones with a wet slap. You freeze. That was too much water to be spilled wine. You stare up at the offending window. A woman leans out, shakes her hands dry, and disappears back inside as casually as if she'd waved to a friend. A quirky tidbit pops into your mind. Ancient writers complained constantly that living on the ground floor meant you were closer to danger. That danger wasn't crime, it was falling objects, trash, bathwater, chamber pots, even broken household items, and yes, people occasionally threw things without warning. Your instincts are correct. Middle of the street walking is survival. Historians still argue whether tenants on higher floors really dumped waste more often, or if the stereotype exaggerated the problem. But as you watch a toddler on a balcony gleefully attempting to toss something wet over the edge before his mother intervenes, you feel confident taking the yes they absolutely did position. You continue slowly, navigating small puddles of questionable origin. One glistens, with a greasy sheen. Another contains flecks of something vegetable. A dog sniffs at the puddle, sneezes violently and walks off with the dignity of someone who has just survived a personal betrayal. Your sandals tap lightly, careful and deliberate. You've learned. Up ahead, two older women sit on stools near a doorway, talking and shelling beans. They wave as you pass, but they also gesture subtly to the centre of the street, as if to say, "Trust us. You don't want to walk close to the walls here." You obey without hesitation. A sudden thump echoes above. You glance up just in time to see a small wicker basket being lowered on a rope. A boy on the 4th floor shouts down to a vendor, who places a loaf of bread inside. The boy hauls it back up. Convenient, efficient, slightly terrifying, because if a loaf can fall, so can many other things. The smell thickens as you move deeper. You catch hints of spilled stew drying on stone, damp wood from rickety staircases, unwashed clothing drying too slowly in the shade, and the earthy aroma of too many bodies living too close together. There's also the unmistakable scent of a neglected drain, stagnant, swampy, and absolutely plotting something. A soft joke floats into your sleepy thoughts. These insulae were Rome's version of apartment living. Noisy neighbours, unstable floors, and free-falling water included. You stop beside a doorway where a cracked terracotta pipe juts from the wall. A slow drip falls from it, steady, predictable, and very much not rainwater. The droplets create a small, dark patch on the street that other pedestrians avoid like a religious ritual. You join them. Further down, a man opens his shutters and shakes out a rug. Dust, crumbs, and something that looks like crushed herbs float downward. You step aside with the grace of someone who has narrowly avoided disaster multiple times today. A mule stands tethered beside one insula, flicking its ears. It sniffs the air, narrows its eyes, and moves a single step to the left to avoid a new puddle forming under a drain pipe. The mule knows things. Follow the mule. You turn another corner and the smell shifts again. Less sour, more smoky. Someone is cooking lentils over a tiny brazier in the hallway of their building. The smoke drifts into the street, blending with the heavier scents. For a moment you smell warmth, cumin, and garlic. Then the drain nearby burps, sending up a faint echo of yesterday's waste. The lentils do not win. Up above, someone calls out, "Cave Cannon!" You instinctively duck, thinking something is about to be thrown, but it's just a man warning his neighbour about a dog below. You straighten slowly. Rome has rewired your reflexes. As you near the far end of the insular cluster, the smells slowly loosen their grip. The air dries. The buildings open up. The wind stirs through a wider intersection, carrying away hints of dampness, waste, and mystery puddles. You take a long, cautious breath. It's not quite fresh, not quite clean. But after the concentrated aroma cocktail of the insulae, it feels liberating. You step out of the shadows, letting the narrow street scent fade behind you, ready to face whatever new smell Rome has waiting in its endless, fragrant labyrinth. You step out of the cramped, leaking insular alleys and into a brighter, wider stretch of Rome. Sun pouring onto the stones, voices rising, colours flashing. For a blissful moment, the air feels clearer, fresher, almost nice. And then you hear music, laughter, the clatter of carts decorated with flowers, someone yelling joyfully about offerings, someone else shouting, "Wine, fresh wine!" Ah, you've walked straight into a festival day, which means one thing and one thing only, Rome's usual smells, plus a whole new layer of chaos. As you wade into the crowd, the scent hits you with festival enthusiasm, strong enough to literally stop you mid-step. Imagine mixing incense, sweat, fireplace smoke, trampled herbs, stale wine, sacrificial leftovers, animal droppings, and street food, then heating it all in the sun. Congratulations. You now understand the fragrance of a Roman holiday. A group of young men jog past carrying garlands of flowers. They're sweating profusely, and the garlands are wilting in real time, adding a note of crushed vegetation to the air. You catch a whiff, fresh, green, slightly sour, and realize that most flowers here aren't fragrant, they're symbolic. Their smell mixes with everything else instantly. A mainstream historical fact floats up. Roman festivals were constant. There were over 100 official holiday days each year, plus local ones, guild celebrations, military parades, household rituals, and impromptu street parties whenever someone decided life was too short to live quietly. Festivals multiplied smells like rabbits. You pass a street altar decorated with little clay lamps. A priestess tosses a pinch of incense onto burning coals. The smoke rises in elegant spirals, carrying the scent of frankincense and myrrh. Sweet, resinous, ancient. It's lovely, truly lovely, for about 3 seconds. Then someone beside the altar slaughters a small goat for the offering. You don't see the moment, but you smell it. Oh, you smell it. Warm iron, fresh meat, a surprising hint of hay. And the faint, sharp scent of bowels reacting to being extremely done with this situation. You inhale, slowly, bravely, and your nose reports back that it has no further comments at this time. A quirky tidbit emerges from the sleepy part of your brain. Some festivals required animals to be paraded through the streets before being sacrificed, which meant they walked through crowded lanes with nervous energy, dropping gifts everywhere. The bigger the festival, the more gifts. Rome never wasted an opportunity to add to its smell collage. Historians still argue whether the sacrificial meat was always eaten afterward, or if some offerings simply burned completely on the altar. But the smell of sizzling fat drifting toward you right now makes you suspect that at least somebody is planning a barbecue. A group of flute players passes by, blowing notes that wobble with enthusiasm but questionable skill. They're sweating in the sun, olive oil sheen reflecting light off their foreheads. The scent of warm human effort floats around them like a cloud, musky, energetic, slightly fermented from last night's wine. Speaking of wine, a wine vendor wobbles toward you, sloshing amphora after amphora of cheap red wine into clay cups. The air around him smells like grapes, vinegar, resin, and hope. Patrons spill more wine than they drink, turning the stones into sticky purple islands where flies swarm with delight. You step around a puddle that looks like it once had dignity. Another vendor shouts about pastries made with honey and cheese. Your stomach perks up. The aroma is heavenly, warm, sweet, soft. But directly next to him, a different vendor grills cuts of questionable meat over charcoal made of old olive pits. The smell is smoky, oily, and deeply committed to the idea of existing forever. The two smells collide somewhere between your nose and brain, forming an aroma you might call sweet meaty confusion. Children run in circles chasing each other with laurel branches, kicking up dust that mixes with incense smoke and animal musk. One child drops his laurel branch into a puddle of something you refuse to identify. He picks it up anyway. He's fine. Children in ancient Rome had immune systems forged in chaos. A soft joke drifts into your mind. If Rome ever invented a scented candle inspired by festival days, it would be called Celebration Fog, TM. Hints of incense, sweat, goat, and lightly used wine. You drift further into the crowd as the smells intensify. A troupe of actors performs a short comedic scene on a temporary wooden stage. Their colourful masks are painted with thick oils that emit a strong turpentine-like scent, especially under the heat. The actors gesture wildly, sweat flying off their cheeks. Every time they project their voices, they project their smells too. Nearby, someone burns a handful of herbs, rosemary, sage, and maybe thyme. The fragrant smoke blends beautifully with the incense, until the crowd moves, and you're ambushed by the smell of a man eating garum-seasoned sausages. You nearly levitate backwards. Another performer juggles flaming torches, each coated in animal fat to burn brighter. The burning fat releases a warm, greasy aroma that reminds you faintly of the butcher stalls from earlier. Familiar, but not comforting. Suddenly a procession approaches. You hear the chanting before you see the people. A line of worshippers walks by carrying statues of household gods. Someone splashes perfumed oil into the air, sending a mist of floral scent drifting toward you. Beautiful, light, and blessedly pleasant. Then one of the carriers stumbles, the statue tips slightly, and a bowl of offering fruit hits the ground. The fruit bursts open. The smell bursts with it. Overripe figs, crushed grapes, squishy pears, sticky sweetness rising into the air like a sugary ghost with no boundaries. Flies swarm instantly. Kids grab whatever pieces they can before adults shoo them away. The street becomes a river of scents. Sweet, smoky, salty, sweaty, herbal, animal, metallic, fermented, oily, blending into one unstoppable sensory wave. You breathe it all in slowly because at this point your nose has given up complaining and is simply embracing the journey. This is Rome at its loudest, brightest, smelliest, most chaotic self. And somehow, it's wonderful. You step beyond the festival crowd, letting the scents fade behind you like music at the end of a long, wild party, ready to follow the next strange note in Rome's endless olfactory symphony. You drift away from the festival frenzy, garlands, sweat, incense, goat and wine, letting the noise fade behind you like an exhausted drum. The sky deepens toward evening now, that warm Roman dusk where shadows stretch long across the stones and the sun dips low enough to soften the city's edges. You take a slow breath. This is the moment when Rome exhales, and a completely different collection of smells emerges. Because now you're entering the hours ruled not by merchants or bakers or tanners, but by the night watch, the men who patrol the city with torches, clubs, and a deep familiarity with every alleyway smell imaginable. The street quiets, voices fade, the festivals retreat into pockets of distant laughter, and almost immediately you can tell the scent of the city is shifting, no longer hot and aggressive. Now it's cooler, denser, earthier, a nighttime bouquet of damp stone, dying fires, stale wine, leftover meals, sleeping animals, and slow simmering waste. A torch flares to life up ahead. The flame hisses as it catches the oil-soaked rag, releasing a burst of smoke that smells like burned cloth mixed with resin. The watchman carrying it steps into view, a man with a leather cap, a wooden baton, and the calm expression of someone who has seen and smelled everything. He nods as you approach. The torchlight illuminates the stones, revealing details you didn't notice earlier. Tiny bits of fruit mashed from the festival, smears of ash from street braziers, and thin puddles of water reflecting the flame like melted amber. A mainstream historical fact surfaces. Rome's night watch, the vigiles, served as firefighters, police, and general guardians of public order. They were trained to navigate the city in darkness, which meant learning to recognize danger not just by sight, but by smell. Smoke, fire, stagnant water, spoiled food, leaking waste. They could track all of it. A warm breeze drifts through the street, carrying with it the smell of dying coals from household cooking fires. You catch hints of charred lentils, grilled fish, slightly burnt barley cakes. Mixed in is the scent of oil lamps. Lamp oil had a distinctive tang, grassy and slightly rancid, especially when burned low. Then the watchman's torch swings gently, stirring the air and revealing a new layer of the city's nighttime perfume. Damp wood from old doors, mildew from shaded courtyards, and the faint, earthy smell of moss growing in cracks between stones. A quirky tidbit slides into your mind. Roman night patrols sometimes carried sponges dipped in vinegar to press against their noses when passing especially foul alleys. The vinegar didn't remove the smell, it simply replaced it with a more tolerable, aggressively sour distraction. You consider asking this watchman whether he has one now. Judging by the street ahead, he might need it. The torchlight reveals a side alley dark enough to look suspicious even in daylight. The air here is stagnant, heavy, and carries a low, sour undertone that feels like the ghost of 1,000 chamber pots haunting one specific corner. You step near the edge and immediately step back. The watchman chuckles softly. "Don't go down there," he says. "That one holds the day's secrets." You appreciate the poetic phrasing. You also appreciate the warning. As you continue following the torch's glow, the smells of the city shift like slow-moving weather patterns. The warmth of the day fades from the stones, letting nighttime moisture seep in. You smell damp earth where puddles linger. You smell old straw where animals have settled for sleep. You smell the faint sweetness of spilled wine drying into a sticky crust. And under it all, the ever-present scent of human life in close proximity. Sweat, food, waste and laughter, lingering in the warm Roman air. Historians still argue whether nighttime Rome smelled worse or better than daytime Rome. Some say the cooler air calmed the scents, others say it trapped them low, keeping everything close to the ground. Tonight, with the torches stirring the air like lazy fireflies, you lean toward the second theory. The watchman taps the stones with his baton, a rhythmic, deliberate sound meant to signal his presence. A dog nearby lifts its head, sniffs, then curls back into sleep. You catch a faint smell of wet fur as you pass. Up ahead, you see another patrol. 2 men, one holding a lantern, the other dragging a long hook used for pulling down burning debris. Their lantern releases a warm, soft glow along with the scent of oil and smoke. They greet the first watchman, exchange a few murmured words, then split off into another street. You follow the torchbearer's path, stepping over a trickle of water that glimmers with reflections. It smells faintly of minerals and whatever washed downhill from the insulae earlier. The cool night air makes the scent sharper. A soft joke drifts into your tired mind. Rome may sleep, but its smells absolutely do not. The watchman turns another corner, lifting his torch toward a shadowy recess beneath the staircase. He inspects it briefly. Out scurries a rat, fat, confident, and clearly familiar with the night shift. The rat smells vaguely like grain and alley dust as it darts past you. You give it space. The watchman lifts the torch again, lighting the wall where ivy creeps across old brick. The ivy smells fresh and green. Finally, something pleasant. But beneath it, the wall's crevices exhale warm, mildewed air from interior rooms that trap heat during the day. The scent is earthy, dense, cloying. You inhale, then regret it. As the patrol continues, you sense how different Rome feels at night. Quieter, slower, more secretive. The scents become softer, more layered, less aggressive. Not better exactly, just older, deeper, like the city is whispering instead of shouting. A bakery fires up its oven for tomorrow's loaves, sending the smell of fresh dough into the air. You savor it. Finally something nice. Then you smell the smoke rising from the baker's wood pile, scrap wood and olive pits, and realize the nice smell lasts only seconds before joining the smoky haze. Still, it's Rome. Every scent tells a story. You follow the watchman one last time as he crosses a dim courtyard. A fountain trickles at the center. The water smells cold, metallic, and clean enough to feel like a blessing. You pause to breathe it in. Then the torchlight fades behind a distant archway, and the night air settles around you, warm, ancient, gently pungent, endlessly alive. Rome may be quieter now, but the smells have only just begun to rearrange themselves for the night. You watch the last torch disappear into the dusky maze of streets, leaving you in a quieter Rome, still warm, still alive, and still absolutely full of smells waiting to pounce on your senses. But these nighttime scents are gentler now, sleepier. The chaos has softened into something slower, something that feels like the city is finally winding down, or at least pretending to. You drift forward into a broader street lit by scattered oil lamps. Their flames flicker inside clay housings, casting soft halos of light against stone walls blackened by centuries of smoke. And that's when you hear it. A faint scrape, a thump, and the swish of a long-handled broom. Ah, it's the hour of morning cleanup attempts, though morning is generous. Some sweepers start well before dawn, taking advantage of the quieter night to clear the worst parts of the day's debris. You see the first cleaner now, a wiry man pushing a rough broom made of bundled twigs. He moves down the street with slow, deliberate strokes, sweeping yesterday's chaos into neat little piles. Dust rises in soft clouds around him, carrying with it the faint scent of spent incense, crushed herbs, gritty sand, and, yes, just a lingering hint of donkey contribution. The sweepers are Rome's unsung heroes, and judging from the smell around you, they're also chronically overwhelmed. A mainstream historical fact wanders into your mind like a tired worker clocking in. The city employed official street cleaners called scoparii. Their job was to sweep gutters, remove trash, and clear debris from busy streets. But with Rome's population exploding into the hundreds of thousands, these workers were always outnumbered by everything else. You step aside as one cleaner pushes a mound of debris toward the gutter. The mound contains shredded fig leaves, olive pits, dusty straw, bits of broken pottery, a scrap of sandal leather, something suspiciously sticky, and a tiny, unidentifiable smear that whispers, "Don't touch me." A gentle breeze nudges the mound, releasing an aroma of warm dust, old food, and festival leftovers. You inhale cautiously and immediately taste memories of Section 9. Children, still awake somehow, help one sweeper gather smaller debris with handheld brushes. They chat cheerfully as they work, oblivious to the scent. One tosses a piece of wilted cabbage onto a pile with a flourish. Another swings his brush dramatically, spraying a fine mist of dust into the air that sparkles for a moment in lamplight. then settles into your nose with gritty confidence. A quirky tidbit rises. Some Romans dumped their trash directly into the street not out of laziness, but because sweepers expected it. The street was the collection point. Piles were the system. Neatness meant putting trash somewhere someone else could handle it before dawn. In this sense, the city's sanitation model was collaborative, in a terrifying way. You watch another. Worker kneel beside a drain. He pokes a stick into the grate, stirring what must be a nightmarish mixture of runoff, old water, and street residue. A bubble rises. You flinch. He shrugs. Perhaps bubbles are just part of his job description. Historians still argue whether these nighttime cleanup efforts made a significant difference, or were simply symbolic gestures against an unstoppable tide of waste. But as you watch a cart roll by carrying a mound of collected trash, flies swirling, liquids dripping, you suspect the answer is both. You follow the sweepers deeper into the street as they move with the rhythm of people who have done this 1,000 times. Their brooms scrape, push, gather and lift. Their sandals scuff. Their breathing stays steady. They are warriors of filth, quietly battling odours no mortal should ever meet in the dark. One sweeper carries a small clay pot of oil, his lantern fuel, slung from a cord at his side. When he moves, the oil sloshes and releases a whiff of thick, grassy scent, a welcome break from the smell of crushed fish bones he just collected. A soft joke drifts through your brain. Rome didn't so much clean its streets as it gently nudged the dirt into slightly more organised positions. As you continue walking, you notice how the smell of the city changes with every sweep. Piles disappear. Stone becomes visible. The scent grows lighter, almost hopeful. But then you turn a corner, and there it is, a massive heap of garbage waiting for collection. Apparently this part of the route didn't get serviced yesterday, or the day before. The smell radiates outward in warm waves. Rotting herbs, spoiled fruit, fish guts, ashes, and the unmistakable sour tang of fermentation. You stagger half a step back. The sweepers approach the heap with resigned amusement. Again, one mutters. The others just sigh and get to work, breaking it apart to make it easier to load. Dust rises. More smells rise with it. The city keeps no secrets tonight. As they load the cart, you notice the wheels are caked with old grime. When the cart moves, it leaves wet streaks behind, smelling faintly like damp straw and ancient disappointment. And yet, in their slow, steady progress, the sweepers begin to tame the street. Little by little, the piles shrink. The mounds disappear. The gutters clear. The smells soften. By the time they finish this section, the street smells almost calm. Still far from clean, but calmer. You realise the sweepers aren't fighting to erase the smell. They're fighting to prevent it from becoming unbearable. Rome doesn't aim for freshness. Rome aims for survivability. And thanks to these night workers, the city just manages to cross that line. You exhale slowly, letting the softened scent settle around you like a warm blanket. The cleanup is ending. The city is preparing for another dawn. And you're almost ready for the final truth Rome has waiting for you. You leave the sweepers. Behind, their brooms fading into the soft scrape that marks the end of Rome's long, chaotic day. The sky brightens with the faintest pre-dawn blush, pale, sleepy, almost shy. And as the first hints of morning light stretch across the rooftops, you inhale, carefully, and realize something unexpected. You're getting used to it. Not just the smells themselves, but the rhythm of them. The way Rome breathes through the night and into the morning. The way each scent, no matter how shocking at first, belongs to something alive. Work, food, water, fire, ritual, community, and the stubborn determination of millions of people living in a city that never apologizes for being exactly what it is. The air around you now is a soft remix of everything you've survived today. Faint, diluted, gentle. A leftover whisper of tannery fumes, a ghost of festival incense, a shy hint of garbage mounds, a tiny echo of the bathhouse steam, all smoothed out by cool air and distant breezes. This is the moment when Rome resets. A mainstream historical fact settles into your mind like dust on stone. Ancient travellers often wrote that Rome overwhelmed them at first. Too loud, too crowded, too smelly. But given time, The city worked its way into their senses until its odours became part of its identity. Not pleasant, not repulsive, simply Rome, and that's exactly what's happening to you. You walk slowly, savouring the way your senses are adjusting, not numbing, but adapting. Humans are wonderfully resilient. Nose fatigue is a real thing, and here, where life spills openly into the streets, your brain stops fighting the smells and begins categorising them into something almost familiar. A quirky tidbit pops into your thoughts. Some ancient Romans claimed that the city smelled fresh after rain. Fresh is a bold claim, but the logic makes sense. Rain washed away the worst of the streets and stirred the Tiber's breezes through the alleys. You imagine that moment now, comparing it to dawn's gentle clarity. Not fresh, no, but softened, like someone turned the volume down on an enthusiastic orchestra. Historians still argue whether Romans truly stopped noticing the smell or simply accepted it as part of daily life. But as you walk through this quiet hour, you understand. It's not that the smells disappear. They become part of the background hum, like a low chord played beneath the melody of the city. You drift toward a fountain where a few early risers gather. One man splashes water on his face, sighing contentedly despite the faint mineral tang. A woman fills a small pitcher for her morning porridge. Two boys chase each other in circles, laughing as though the world has never smelled strange at all. Even the city animals seem calmer now. A donkey nibbles hay outside a bakery, tail flicking peacefully. A street dog stretches luxuriously, yawns in your direction, and trots toward the fountain for a drink. Pigeons coo from a nearby rooftop, completely unfazed by anything you've smelled today. A baker opens his door, sending out the warm aroma of freshly baked bread. Finally, a scent that makes your stomach flutter instead of your eyebrows. The bread smell mingles with the faint smoke of his oven, forming a soft morning perfume that almost overpowers the rest. A cart rolls past carrying fresh herbs toward the market. You catch a breeze of rosemary, mint, and wild celery. Your nose perks up like a curious dog. Someone nearby chuckles at your expression. And yes, even the less pleasant smells have mellowed. The garbage piles have thinned. The gutters have cleared. The chamber pot remnants have dried into dust. The alley sewers haven't yet warmed enough to start their dramatic monologues. Rome, for this brief moment, smells like a city waking up. A soft joke drifts into your sleepy thoughts. Congratulations, you now have the official Roman nose upgrade. No subscription needed. You continue walking, letting the morning air settle around you. You think about everything you've inhaled today, everything the city has thrown at you, and instead of recoiling, you feel oddly grounded. Because Rome is messy, Rome is loud, Rome is chaotic, and Rome is alive. Its smells aren't meant to disgust you. They're meant to remind you that millions of lives unfold here, woven into every stone. That humanity leaves traces, not clean, not neat, but unmistakably real. And somehow, by surviving this walk, you've become part of that ancient rhythm, breathing in the same scents Romans did 2,000 years ago, drifting through their mornings and nights like a quiet ghost with really good observational skills. You inhale one last time, slow, steady, accepting, and Rome exhales right back. And now, as the final scents of your long Roman stroll fade into the soft blur of early morning light, let everything slow, weigh down, let the colours soften, let the edges of the city melt into a gentle haze. Breathe in, lightly, just enough to feel the air settle in your chest, and then breathe out, letting every corner of this ancient world drift away from you like dust in a quiet sunbeam. The streets empty, the sounds grow faint, even the stubborn smells begin to loosen their grip, dissolving into something distant, something harmless, something that no longer needs to pull your attention anywhere. The city becomes smooth and quiet, a fading echo rather than a constant pulse. You picture the cobblestones beneath your feet turning cool and still, washed in pale gold light, empty of crowds, empty of carts, empty of everything except the soft rhythm of your breathing. The fountains trickle more quietly now. The last of the night wind sighs past you, a gentle reminder that the world can be calm, even here. Let your shoulders settle. Let the weight of the day slide off like a cloak slipping to the floor. The city grows hazy, slower, softer, almost dreaming with you. Every scent becomes just a memory, then a whisper, then nothing at all. Your eyes grow heavy, your breathing smooths. The world narrows to a warm, peaceful quiet, and Rome, once loud and wild and overwhelming, becomes a lullaby, steady, ancient, and endlessly patient. Whenever you're ready, let sleep take the next step.